Hear, feel, think. The rains have ceased, and we have been graced with another beautiful day.
Greetings, you who are my final encounter.
But what was it that you came here to do exactly?
Never have I understood those around me, understood their obsessions.
These are words I think about often when I think of the ending to Endwalker. I find myself relating to Xenos in the strangest way. Not with his psychopath, power-hungry, genocidal nature, but with his boredom of life and search for any sort of fulfillment. Endwalker truly lives up to his name by not just being an end to the main story arc since 1.0, but also by giving an end to a chunk of the main cast character arcs. Xenos, spurred on by Alizé's words in Godamald, relents and does a grand yet selfish act of good by helping the Warrior of Light defeat the Endsinger. The Scions nearly all have some form of closure to their past struggles, whether it's Urianger's grieving with Moonbreeder's parents, or Estinian's speech in Ultima Thule. They're each given a chance to show off their character development and personalities in grand fashion. The Ancients go from these mysterious beings who we really only knew one person's perspective of, to these brilliant yet foolish people. A race that had achieved what they believed to be utopia, but were so blind in their hubris that they doomed not just themselves, but the entire universe. But in the end are redeemed by the actions of a few. Their legacy to be carried out by one who was at first deemed unfit by the very man who would end up entrusting it to them. And finally, the main character themselves, who is more often than not just a vessel for the player, is given proper closure to their journey. From the very moment of their existence, they carry a heavy weight. At first, it's simply the burden of saving Eorzea, next to freeing multiple nations from decades or even millennia of war, then having to save not one but 2 worlds from ruin, and finally the fate of all life itself rests upon their shoulders. Yet throughout it all, they never faltered, their will unbroken even as despair and death closed in around them, even as the last cries of multiple fallen races rang out. They carried their burden until the very end. Only when the deed is done, when the skies are clear, and when wings of hope sing again, do they finally take a well-deserved rest. Final Fantasy XIV is a tale about burdens. The burden of strength, the burden of duty, the burden of justice, the burden of truth, the burden of empathy, the burden of life, the burden of sacrifice, the burden of forgiving, the burden of hope, the burden of status, the burden of revenge, the burden of knowing, the burden of death, and the burden of love. All these burdens and themes and characters come together to weave a grand tale of the struggle of existence. So much of the story revolves around facing the cruel nature of the world and the people within it, the Garleans' constant conquests and the fall of their nation, the Dragonsong War and the tapestry of lies that holds Ishgard together, the broken spirit of Doma and how their own culture ended up creating its worst villain, and the people of the First clinging so desperately to life. I'd like to take a moment to highlight 2 moments that stand out to me when thinking about the nature of the struggles these characters go through. Gilbert is the embodiment of Alamigo's worst parts. He's a lying backstabber who would pave a path of bodies to reach his goals. He's in part responsible for one of the lowest points the Scions reach. He amputates a fellow countryman and causes countless deaths at Belzar's wall just to summon one of the most dangerous primals ever seen. Gilbert is a radical and dangerous man who meddles with forces far beyond his understanding. His plan is a nonsensical mess that results in Xenos obtaining the very power he attempted to use against them. He's a snideful prick who believes himself a righteous martyr till the very end. Yet, despite all that, in his final moments he calls out to a god he does not believe in, to save a people who no longer believe in themselves. He throws himself from the precipice to the steel below, warmed by fire and blood. His pain and desperation are a reflection of the people of Alamigo, a man who lived his life trying in his own misguided way to save them, his final hope clutched in his hands as his lifeless body laid still. The last we would ever see of Ilbert is his hollow face and white dead eyes, encapsulated by this twisted expression of pain and hate. But it would not be the last we see of the Garleans, far from it. Aside from Shadowbringers and most of Heavensward, they are a near constant threat in the story. Their conquest aims to bring the whole world under their bloody banner. They stop at nothing to defeat and break those they wage war upon, even reaching so low as to attempt large-scale genocide through the production and use of Black Rose, a deadly toxin gas. An action that in an alternate timeline leads to the fall of several nations and ushered in the 8th Umbral Calamity. From prejudice to human experiments to genocide, the Garleans are made to be an outright evil upon the world. The ones we meet within the story paint a grisly picture of life in the Empire. Events like the War of Secession, the harsh region the nation resides in, and the population's dogmatic beliefs against other races. So when Endwalker finally takes us to the doorstep of the Empire, when we finally reach the moment we walk into the very nation that has caused the death and suffering of countless people, we are met not with blade and machine, but with a frozen stillness. The only noise is the harsh winds that sweep across the land, and the ghostly voice on the radio, singing a requiem to a home that is now far beyond the horizon. Garlemald is my favorite section of the story in the entire game. It's one of the most harrowing and daunting tales I've witnessed. A people so broken, yet still so prideful and so sure in their beliefs, that a veteran soldier would rather take his own life than see his home tarnished. And a pair of sisters would rather brave the wind and the cold before accepting the help of the savages they so despised. I could speak for hours about Garlemald, but perhaps another day. For now, let's move on and out from this cold, and try to find some meaning in all this sorrowful struggling.
Fight and struggle.
To all of my children, to whom death hath passed his judgment, the
We who yet
soul
walk the
yearns
path should not think too much on the
for
destination.
and the flesh the hereafter.
If you had the strength to take another step,
Look to those
could you do it?
who walked before, to lead those who
Is this
walk after.
the answer I was hoping for?
Meaning is a prevalent theme throughout Final Fantasy XIV. It etches itself into so many aspects that you'd have trouble finding every instance of it. Though the most notable example of meaning within the story is the very meaning of living. While this tends to be a question many stories bring up, I find 14's methods of approaching and interpreting this question to be unique, and the answer it arrives upon is both imposing and hopeful. But to understand the answer, we must first understand the purpose of the question. The Ancients are an intriguing race of beings. First, they appear to be a perfect race with a perfect world. Emmett Silk and the other Ashians certainly paint such a glorious picture. And when we finally journey to the past to uncover the truth behind the final days, we find what appears to be this perfect world. Yet, as we begin to explore and meet Hermes, we are met with a realization that things might not be so perfect in paradise. The Ancients are on a never-ending course to reach perfection. All aspects of their culture form from the ideas of living a perfect life and creating a perfect world. They wear uniform masks and robes to enforce a sense of community over individuality. Only ideas and creations that benefit their society and world were entertained, and once a person has completed their life's work, it is custom for them to willingly let their life go, returning to the stars so that they might begin new work in the next life. To their culture, these ideals and customs are normal and morally correct. But to an outsider looking in, it's hard to deny a certain eeriness in the way the ancients value life. Hermes is the chief overseer of Elpis, a testing grounds where creation magics, a form of magic unique to the ancients, are used to form new life. That life is then determined by the workers to be worthy of existence or not. Hermes stands out among the ancients as being one of the few who appears to value all life. Even when erasing a creature that attacked others unprovoked, he felt sorrow for its life being taken from it, where others simply remarked that it was unfit to live in their world. Creation magics have quite literally given the ancients a god complex. They believe themselves the only judge of what life should and should not be on Atheris. Hermes, disheartened by this lifestyle, turns to the stars for answers. He creates a being known as Medion, an extremely empathic creation who is capable of traversing the great expanse of the cosmos. Hermes sends Medion's sisters, the Media, unto the Sea of Stars, their shared consciousness connecting them across thousands of light years. Their goal is simple: find other beings and question if they are happy and their reason for living. They would then relay this information to Hermes, and he would use their answers to determine if there was a meaning to life. However, the Media only came across dead and dying worlds, grand civilizations wiped out either by external or internal sources. The loss and pain and death they encountered would overwhelm their shared mind, warping and twisting it until all that remained was a broken husk of a once gentle creature. Medion would determine by itself that life was the cause of all suffering in the universe, and as such, death was the only cure to the pain of living. Death was the only fate that awaited all life, no matter how much it struggled against it. As such, they believed it to be a gift that should not be denied, offering it in the way of the Song of Oblivion. While the heroes of our story attempted to stop Medion before she could escape, Hermes would side with her, delaying them while also attempting to wipe their memories. He posed a question not just to the heroes, but to his entire society. If they were as imperfect as the creatures they made, would it not be right for them to also be erased? To determine the answer to this question, he proposed a challenge to all mankind. Should they learn to value life and retain their will to live, then surely they could overcome the oblivion that Medion would bring. Venat is one of the four that attempted to stop Hermes and Medion. An eccentric woman to the ancients, she was the former holder of the seat of Azim on the Convocation of 14. Those who hold the title of Azim are expected to traverse the world and meet its various peoples and cultures, seeking these sites not only to enrich their people, but to also warn them of potential threats. However, once retired, Venat did not return to the Etherical Sea, instead choosing to continue to explore, just no longer in the name of the Convocation. Though through these explorations, she would come to value life much in the same way Hermes does. Her and the Warrior of Light would be the only two who escaped before their memories were erased, making them the only two beings in the universe who knew of Medion's plan. While the Warrior of Light could only take this information back to the present, Venat would begin her own plan to overcome Medion's despair and defeat Hermes' challenge. When the Song of Oblivion began to tear their world apart, the Convocation would sacrifice half the Ancients' population, along with one of their members. In doing so, they created the first primal, the god of darkness, Zodiark. With his immense power, he could safeguard the planet and its inhabitants, who could have possibly found peace again under his protection. However, their desire for a perfect, sorrowless life led to further loss. First, another half of the remaining population would be used to restore the planet, making it fit for life once more. Then when new life began to form, they would offer it up to the Dark God, so that they might restore their fallen brethren. Venat, along with like-minded individuals, opposed these additional sacrifices, her core belief that the sorrow and pain they felt was a necessary evil, an inescapable truth to living. She pleaded with those that continued to pray for salvation, but in their desperation proved beyond doubt that man as it would never overcome despair, never find an answer to the question. In order to prevent these sacrifices, Venat would assume the form of Hydaelyn, the goddess of light that she and her followers created. Hydaelyn and Zodiark would eventually clash, and while we never see the grand battle itself, we are all too aware of the aftermath. In order to defeat the Dark God, Hydaelyn would shatter the very world itself. The Sundering, as it would become known, split not just the world and Zodiark, but all life as well into 14 pieces. While this action had multiple purposes, the main one we'll focus on is the effect it had on life. The ether and soul of all beings would be split and diminished. Due to these imperfections, man could no longer wield creation magics, nor have such control over the world around them. They would be subjugated to the whims and woes of an uncaring universe, forced to suffer despair and calamity abundant. Their singular lives were finite and fleeting. Many would be dealt unfair hands by either the world or those that lived in it. But Not knew of this when she acted, having been told by the Warrior of Light the type of world that would come to exist past the Sundering. Yet she also knew that this was the path man must walk. They must suffer. They must die. They must endure. Only by existing with these conditions would man seek something greater. Only by suffering would they seek the answer to their pain, the answer to the question. As one would expect, the answer to the question of what people live for and what gives their life meaning is not so easy to find. Yet from the very moment we start the game, we are given the clues to find it.
Hear, feel, think.
These cryptic words lay the path man must take to overcome despair. You must open your ears and eyes to the world around you. Feel the sorrows and joys of life and accept them into your heart. And finally ponder the meaning of such a life, the purpose of such suffering. Answers is a song used sparingly throughout the game, but with good reason. The song is typically used to mark a notable section of the story, whether it's the end of 1.0 or the fall of the Ancients. While Endwalker doesn't change the lyrics or meaning of the song, our perspective is turned on its head when we witness Venant's resolve to sunder mankind. Answers starts with a cry from man, pleading to know why they must suffer and die, why their lives must be subjected to such a harsh reality. The remainder of the song is in itself the answer. It is Hydaelyn replying to those cries, both remorseful and unforgiving in the life she has imposed on her children. While their pain is great, it is a pain they have no choice but to endure. The chorus gives more clues to the answers. For as many ways as there are to find it, there are just as many answers in return. For as the very bringer of despair herself says,
What they live for. What gives their lives meaning. There was never a single answer.
Shining is the land's light of justice.
You,
Ever flows
who are our
the
future.
land's well of purpose. Walk free, walk
Tell me
free,
this, and tell me true.
walk free, believe the
Has your journey been good?
lambs
Has it been worthwhile?
so believe.
I started playing Final Fantasy XIV back in 2021. It was around September, just a few months before Endwalker released. When I think back on it now, I can't remember why I even picked up the game. I had heard of it for many years. Hell, I even listened to and loved multiple songs that I wasn't even aware were from it. I didn't know that this epic, grand conclusion was coming soon with Endwalker. To be honest, I didn't even like MMOs at all. All I can remember is being bored. The COVID pandemic had been going on for about a year. While myself and the people I care about were never really affected, that didn't stop me from feeling the change in the world that was occurring. I was 22 at the time, no longer a kid, but I barely felt like an adult. In many ways, I still don't. I had gotten a degree in the field I wanted, but couldn't find the right job for me. I had a full life ahead of me, yet I didn't know where to begin. Adding on the weight of a world that felt like it was growing crazier and crazier every day, plus no longer enjoying many of the things I once did, a part of me broke. Though in many ways I always considered myself broken. I didn't have the worst childhood, didn't suffer abuse, and my parents have always done their best to raise me. I was bullied, but what kid wasn't? And it certainly was not as bad as it could have been. I met an amazing group of friends who I knew for over a decade, though we've all drifted apart and no longer talk like we used to. In all honesty, the worst I've ever dealt with in life was the death of my first dog. He was old and sick, and he left us just a week before I graduated. So when I think of my life and what I've experienced, I don't think it's fair for me to feel depressed or despondent. And still a part of me felt that way. This constant gnawing and clawing within myself, pulling me deeper and deeper. Didn't even notice until I was basically drowning. It wasn't until I started playing 14 that I began to see those feelings for what they were. I think it would be drastic of me to say something like, Final Fantasy XIV saved my life. However, I do believe in full certainty that it has changed it. The story itself is powerful and capable of pulling emotions out of basically everyone who experiences it. The only other game that has caused me to cry was Red Dead Redemption 2, another tale about the journey of redeeming oneself and finding the answer to what is the purpose of my life. I found myself on the edge of my seat, trying to hold back tears and often failing at many key moments in the game. Emmett Selk's final plea, Elidibus remembering his companions, Portiono confessing to the twins, Heidelin's goodbye, Hades' smile, and Medion's final song, to name a few. For those that listen to the lessons of the story and take them to heart, you can find yourself having a new perspective on things. And while I would love to talk about every moment the story made me think deeper about myself, there's something else that had a greater effect on me. For those that don't know, in Ishgard there's a zone called the Firmament, where once the Ishgardian Restoration took place, an event that occurred during Shadowbringer patches. While the main focus is no longer available, there are these constant mini-games going on called Fates, fun little activities that involved many things like crafting giant Moogle plushies or handing out presents to the visitors. But when I first arrived at the Firmament after completing Heavensward, I remember finding these silly games and loving it. There were these nice little breaks from the story, and since they followed a mostly consistent schedule, I could always rely on them to be around when I needed a breather. I soon became a regular and made it to just about everyone I could. I would emote at and talk with some of the others I recognized, one of them making a link shell so that we could all stay in contact. I remember feeling nervous yet excited at having so many new people to talk with. We were a Califrol cast and all had little quirks and oddities. Eventually a Discord was made and we all became even closer. Plenty of us would run duties and roulettes together. One time a bunch of us even went to another server to visit a FC-owned aquarium, and I still think about that night. After I completed the story, I still made my visits to Fates and became more talkative and social by the day. At some point, they became my reason to continue playing. Taking on the world of Eorzea was a lot easier with them. However, large friend groups are prone to drama, and we were no different. I won't get into specifics, but one person became jealous of some others and left the group in a not so wonderful way, attempting to ruin the Discord server as they left. Things would recover though, and for a time they were better, but it was really borrowed time as conversations were less frequent, and people began finding new groups to be with. I don't remember my mindset at the time, but I do remember feeling apathy setting in, and I no longer felt quite at home with them. It was around that time that a member of the group reached out to me, asking me if I'd like to join them and a few others who weren't quite as active, to play Valheim. In a rare moment, I even joined a call with them, and in no time at all, I found myself growing close. There were some growing pains at first. Even now, I still remember a big fight I had with one of them over how to call out mechanics for a fight. But for some reason I can't quite explain, we all just stuck together. I hadn't had such fun in years, and the laughs we share, even to this day, never failed to lift my mood. They accepted me for all my problems and issues, pushed me to express myself and be honest about what I want. Even though I was pretty ignorant about others' lifestyles, they didn't berate me, but instead talked to me and helped me to better understand things I didn't know. Even now, they push me to be creative and not hold back on my interests. I would have never started making videos if not for them. They've helped tear down so many walls within myself, walls I never thought would crumble. They make me want to become the best version of myself, something I once thought impossible to obtain. While I still have a long road ahead of me, I know it's one I don't have to walk alone. I know I have them forever by my side. So allow me to indulge myself and thank them. Nuo, Kiku, and Val. Thank you guys. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for all the laughter and strength and advice and everything you've done for me. I have never once regretted the choice to trust you all with my soul. You've all made my journey worthwhile. And I'd like everything I've talked about today to be a lesson for those that might be struggling in ways similar to my own. Don't be afraid to seek kindness in others. Don't be afraid to lean on them when you need to. But also, do not seek the solution to your struggles solely within them. Take their strength and make it your own. Take the things you learn from both the stories you read and the people you meet to heart. Take a chance at love and forgiveness. Take a chance at forgiving yourself. Those are just some of the many things my time with Final Fantasy XIV has taught me, and I hope your time will teach you. But remember that as worthwhile a journey it has been, it is far from over. In fact, we are only just beginning a new tale. One I know that will be as wonderful and memorable as the last. And one I hope we meet on, for a journey is only as wonderful as the people you meet. So until then, look upon that distant horizon and walk forward, head held high and hope in your heart, that each step might take you where you want to be. And when we reach those distant shores and new lands, we'll understand how those struggles made it a worthwhile journey.
To what it takes.